All right, this session is editing in ArcGIS Pro, taking advantage of your environment. We're going to start by introducing the environment, showing how to set some options, then creating the features, modifying them, modifying annotation, and then of course we're going to go into 3D. The session will be mostly demonstrations in ArcGIS Pro with a few slides to pull us back together and recap the demos. As Margie mentioned, there will be time for Q&A at the end, or if you think of something later, our contact info is listed on this slide. So we'll start with an overview. If you are new to ArcGIS Pro, these three terms, ribbons, panes, and context menus, are going to be three terms that you need to get used to using. And they are some of the main features of the editing environment. And let's just jump right into a demonstration. So we jump into ArcGIS Pro here, and to access the editing environment in ArcGIS Pro, you're going to go to the Edit tab. Think of the Edit tab kind of as the Edit toolbar in ArcMap. And working with the Edit toolbar is where you get access to your snapping availability, creating and modifying features, selection tools, and other tools for editing. On this toolbar, you're going to find two buttons, Create and Modify. And the Create button is going to be where you go, that launches the Create Features pane. And here, these are all linked to tools that are inside your Contents pane. So again, this is the Create Features pane. And here you can see a list of all the features that you can create, all based on the Contents pane. Similarly, to launch the Modify Features pane, you click the Modify button. And here you get a very similar view as to your tool gallery up here, but then also you have a way to modify the features using these tools and a handy search function. So those are the two panes that I want to talk about from the Edit tab. Let's talk a little bit about the Contents pane. So this works like your table of contents in ArcMap. There's a few ways that we can control editing. You may have heard that editing in ArcGIS Pro is always on. I prefer to call it on demand, and there's a couple ways that you can control that editing function. And one way is to list your contents by editing. It's this little pencil right here. And here's where you can turn off and on the editing of the features. Also, this can be controlled inside the database. A couple of the other functions that are handy are listing by data source. You can see that in ArcGIS Pro, I have a couple databases in here, and since editing is always on demand, I don't need to start and stop an edit session to edit one of these two, any feature from these two databases. I can just select it in the feature templates and start my session. Similarly, you also have the selection control by selection on the Contents tab. And this is where you can turn off selections for certain features while leaving them on. Helps when you start trying to select multiple features or just one feature sitting on top of another one. And you can also control the snapping. So which features are able to take part in snapping by using the List by Snapping button over here. So there's a little overview of the ArcGIS Pro editing environment. Let's talk a little bit more about the customization availability. So to take advantage of the environment that we just saw, you need to know how to change it to your liking. And knowing where to go is half the battle. Editing is no different to mastering any other GIS workflow, and Pro has some pretty powerful options. So we're gonna jump into another demonstration to show you how to bespoke your Pro. There are a couple ways that you can get into the options. One way is to go through the Project tab and select Options here. But there also is a shortcut on the Edit tab. In the Manage Edits group, there is a little button down here. You can click the editing options and it launches the options right in the main screen. A couple of the most useful editing options. One is show dynamic constraints on the map. This allows you to see how long and at what angle you are drawing. And also it's really great for demonstration purposes to show what's happening. And then also these dynamic constraints you can tab them in. So if you have a specific number that you want to, say a length of 90 feet, you can tab into it and select 90 and you can only draw 90 feet. One of the ones that it's on by default is enabling double click as a shortcut for the finish button. I highly recommend keeping that on. Another one that I like is to show the feature symbology in the sketch. So as I'm sketching, I can see what my feature is going to look like when it's finished. Now we briefly mentioned the editing toolbar and the context menus. And there's a couple ways that you can configure it to look on your screen. I prefer mine to be on the right and to have it be a small size, but you can have it however you like, on the left, on the bottom, etc. Here's one of the biggest upgrades of using ArcGIS Pro, the automatically save edits button. By checking that on, I can have my edits saved automatically in a unit of time or a number of operations. For the demonstration, I'm going to use it every 10 minutes. I don't recommend using that in your regular editing life, and probably would get kind of annoying. What I like to do though is have save edits when saving the project checked on, and then also I like to show a dialog to confirm saving edits. So while you can have ArcMap automatically or ArcGIS Pro automatically save your edits, this allows you to have a little bit more control over when it does that. So in order to send you a reminder, it says, do you want to save these edits? And you can click yes. Having this dialog off, it'll just automatically save it. If you do editing and versioning, there are some versioning control options as well. Another big benefit of using ArcGIS Pro is the ability to enable spell checking. This is on by default, but you can edit your word list. So there's a couple, if you have very specific wording that you want to add to your dictionary so it's not marked wrong every single time, you can add that here. We've gotten a lot of feedback about the missing hotkeys from ArcMap that people love, and I love them too as an editor. So the first thing I want to show you is these accelerators. These accelerators work exactly like the hotkeys. So I can take a look and search for a command. It filters the results, and then since ArcGIS Pro has a lot of contextual features in it, you need to be careful and make sure they're selecting the right one. So I'm going to make sure that I want edit features. It's editing the feature vertices versus an element. I go down to the accelerator and just type in the key combination that I'd like and hit assign. And now Alt-E is going to be my automatic edit vertices button. One of the other newer functions of ArcGIS Pro is the ability to create a specific tab. So this, if you have created custom toolbars in the past and you really like that functionality, this is what you're looking for. So create a new tab allows me to just kind of make a new group here. I'm going to rename it Awesome Demo Tab. And I'm going to make a new group called Demo Group. And this works the same way. So I want to add some tools to that toolbar now. So I'm going to add this one and then take a look, see what we got. Some selection. Yeah, add that one. Okay. I'm going to hit OK. And ArcGIS Pro is going to flash a little bit. And then we'll get up in here. Here is our new awesome demo tab that I spelled incorrectly. But here are the two tools that I added to that demo group. So a couple of ways that you can really be more efficient in ArcGIS Pro by setting these particular options. So the key takeaways that we've gone through so far are that editing in ArcGIS Pro is on demand. Also, you can auto-save your edits, configuring the quick access and ribbon interfaces, and turning on your spell check. We're not going to go into creating features, and there's a few ways that we can do this in ArcGIS Pro, but especially there are using the templates and the tool enhancements to be more efficient. So we'll cover over some of the tool enhancements, show you how to edit multiple workspaces simultaneously, show you a few tools in production mapping that can simplify your editing tasks, and also create multiple features from a single template. The first discussion is along the mirror tool. The mirror tool allows you to take a group of features and transpose them directly at either at an angle or directly across. So this is one of the tool enhancements that we've been asked to put into ArcGIS Pro, and it is now available. So you can see from the video here that in just 2 clicks, we're able to digitize 7 different features. So let's jump back into Pro now and go through some other DIY tips. A couple of the interesting and helpful tools in ArcGIS Pro. One of those tools is the editing grid. So I can use this grid to make sure that my features are aligning properly all the way across the board. In this case, you can see that we have a couple features that are misaligned. And I'm going to use a function here to turn the grid on, but I want to be able to then change the grid's origin and its rotation interactively. So I can set my grid right on this feature and adjust its rotation so that it's perfectly straight along this edge. Now, I can take any of these features and line them up using my grid. So create the grid intersection, it'll let me go on the grid line, etc. I can move them and they're perfectly straight along the grid. So the grid is a great way to make sure everything is lined up, everything maintains its straightness, and you are good to go. A couple of notes about snapping now. So the snapping can be turned on by clicking this snapping button. It can also be temporarily paused by pressing spacebar. And hitting the drop down here, you can decide how you want snapping to behave. There are also specific snap settings for setting the XY tolerances and the snap tip colors as well. This can also be accessed down here with in more of this context menu with snapping right here. All right, let's talk a little bit about feature templates. So you can get an idea of what your feature templates look like by looking in the Create Features pane and hitting the drop down for the type of feature that you'd like to create. And here, these are all just based simply on the drawing of the layer inside the contents pane. But there's something else that we can do with these feature templates, and that is draw multiple features at the same time. So say I have a helicopter landing zone that's always going to be a centroid of my relief area. It's kind of a go-to here. So what we're going to do is manage the templates. Inside relief area, you can see that I have 2 different templates for creating a relief area. And one of those is relief area and HLZ. Opening the properties, I can see that I have different tools that I can select to make this tool. So if you're someone that creates a lot of templates for editing, you can configure how each one of your layers is going to be drawn, or the ability to draw it using whatever tool you have here. One of these great template properties is these builder functions. I can select a primary feature, and then using my other options, I can take a helicopter landing zone and say, put that at the centroid of my feature. So I'm going to do that now. We'll just do a regular polygon. And there we go. So now we have an area feature with a centroid, another feature at the center. So in 4 clicks, I was able to draw a polygon and create 2 features. That also works really well for point features as well. Say, for example, I had a building, and I wanted to note where that building is, and then also all the entrances and exits to that building. So I'm going to create a point, and I'll say address multiple buildings and multiple driveways here. So this is using a specific tool called a Radial Tool. And this allows me to create some builder functions to maintain the feature itself, and then also be able to create many features at the same time. So in this case, what I'm going to do is drop a feature right in the building, then using my Radial Tool, drop another feature at this entrance, and this entrance. So as part of the builder functions, I said, make the first one the address, and then the other ones at the end of the lines to be driveways. All right. So let's get into some of the slightly fancier tools in production mapping. So one of the fancier tools here in production mapping is the difference polygon. And difference polygon, for those of you that create a lot of production maps and you need to make sure that all your features are snapped together, there's no topological errors, no overlaps, gaps. One of the bigger pains is having to go through and punch out features. So we can see that our facility kind of got messed up here. So we're going to get rid of those. And we're going to create a new facility using the difference polygon. You can see what the difference polygon does is it creates my overall facility polygon and punches through any of the buildings that are in there. It will work the same way for any other features. And you can see that they're all topologically sound, no gaps, no slivers, none of those annoying editing type things. One of the other really great tools in production mapping is the build structures tool. And so that fits using not that database. Here we go. So I'm going to take this this area feature. So if I'm collecting, say, a building, it has different capabilities or different attribution based on its size. And I don't want to have to make all the work of measuring every single building, decide if it's collectible or not. So I can use this create structures tool to do that. And so any features that are less than 625 meters will become points. And then what's more is that I'm also going to calculate a few things on the fly: the area, the angle of orientation, the length, and the width. And if you don't have attributes that meet these letters, you can always add them to the back. So it'll look for that that attribute and populate it. So let's go here. So here we go with the big feature. We can see that it has populated the area, the length, AOO, and the width as well, and created the proper polygon. Now we have a smaller building here that should turn into a point with the exact same attribution collected. So in a few short clicks, you're able to create two different feature classes and have a bunch of attribution pre-populated for you, so you don't have to go through that. So that's great. So what if you can make your own features? That's awesome. But what if you need to modify some features? So let's go back into the PowerPoint and check that out. So a couple of key ideas to take away from that last section was that you can edit multiple workspaces simultaneously. I didn't explicitly point it out, but the HLZ example was in one database and the building footprints were in another one. I didn't have to stop edit sessions. I could just pick the template that I wanted and move on. Production mapping is a powerful set of tools that can help you simplify your editing tasks. And you can create multiple features from a single template and use keyboard shortcuts to save time. All right, so the next section is about modifying existing features. And the key ideas are pretty similar, where we want to talk first about some enhancements. And the first enhancement is to the line intersection tool. So line intersection tool allows you to select one feature and select another, and it'll automatically make a perpendicular connection to those two. you can keep going, as you can see in this video here. The extend and trim line feature also has a new enhancement as well. I can select multiple features, and I then point to the feature that I want it to extend all the way to, and it will go through and connect, also making intersection points at that location. A couple other big tool functions are the reshape tool. So the reshape tool allows you to make edits without having to make a selection. So you can see I clicked on this one. And then as long as I have them intersecting, when I double click to finish my sketch, it's going to pull that feature up to where I drew. It can also work in reverse. So say this is going to be a different feature and I want to cut it out. Make sure that I intersect and finish, and it'll reshape the underlying polygon. So those are the tool enhancements. So let's now go into some of the feature modification tips. So a couple of the big functions inside ArcGIS Pro that make modifying features a little simpler than previous is the ability to create map topology and database topology. So inside the database, here I have a topology data set, and it is in my map. I'll turn it on now. So this data set allows me to automatically check for edits. And then if I want to take a look at each edit, there's a nice function here called the error inspector. This error inspector pops open each one of the errors. It also gives me a little preview area, so I can take a look at the edit itself without messing up where I'm looking on my main screen. So I can go through these, set them as an exception, or correct them as I go. So the ability to create a map topology is pretty excellent as well. So you've spent all this time making sure that everything's snapped together. There's no gaps and no slivers. You've done all the checks. Now you have to move one vertice. And if that happens, if you don't have the map topology on, you will actually have to move two vertices. But when you create the features here, let's do, yeah. So I have map topology turned on, and I'm going to select this feature here. If you have map topology turned on, you're going to get a new tab called Edges. And this Edges, clicking over to that tab, shows you the coincident features. So I can either take, there's my save edits warning. So I can take either this vertex. You can see that all of these shapes are being moved at the same time to maintain my topology. So a couple DIY tips there as well. Make sure you take advantage of the topology tools. Takeaways here: make sure you use map topology to protect your edits. Use your error inspector to find your dirty areas, and that is all based on your geodatabase topology. And then the contents pane, as I mentioned before, controls what can be edited either by using list by selection, list by editing, or list by snapping. So our next section that we're going to cover is annotation. This will be a pretty brief demo, but I want to show you some of the new annotation capabilities to make the most of your map text. All right. We are going to create some annotation here. And what's pretty neat is that annotation behaves like any other feature inside your database or inside ArcGIS Pro. So if I want to have if I have a bunch of annotation templates that I want to use, they're going to be under the annotation section. And just selecting one of those pops up the annotation editor. And you can type in your own text here, but there's also a neat function that allows me to find the text from a feature class. So right-clicking on the feature and selecting Find Text pulls in the name of that road. And that is all based on the labeling of that feature class. So we'll select it here, drop the annotation in. Looks pretty cool. There's also a little bit of an advanced annotation editor. So selecting that edit tool allows me to do a couple things. It gives me an additional context menu when I right-click. And one of those abilities is to convert to multi-part annotation. So by doing that, I can take the west and the olive and spread this whole thing out. And so now my annotation spreads more looks a little bit nicer, easy to read on the thing. But I can also then take the entire group and slide it along too. So you have a bunch of finer grained control for dealing with your annotation. The Find Text is one of the newest feature enhancements of creating annotation. There's lots of other things that you can do with Anno, including masking, changing the symbology, etc. And all of that works just the same way as a normal feature class. So the big takeaways here were make sure you use Find Text. That'll help you eliminate spelling errors, eliminate typing, all the kind of annoying stuff. Use multi-part annotation to have finer grained control over what your annotation looks like. You can use masking options to make the Anno more readable. And one thing I didn't show you was you can set annotation attribution to hide unwanted text. I'm actually going to jump it back in and show you that. So I have some annotation here. And if I want to go to the attribution, it comes with a little attribute called status. And this status is something that I can adjust and say unplaced. And so if I want to update the attribution and say that I want to make a bunch of annotation, but I may not want to show it all, I can have really fine-grained control over which annotation that I see just by changing the attributes. All right. So we are moving on to our last section of editing. And of course, we are going to go into editing in 3D. So ArcGIS Pro, as you may have heard before, is a 2D and 3D environment. And you can edit it in 2D and 3D at the same time. But in the case of this demo, I have what I think is a pretty special treat. So this is Europe, beautiful continent. And inside Europe, there's a beautiful country called Denmark. And in Denmark, there is a little town known or called Billund. And in Billund, there is a pretty famous building, maybe a pretty famous toy manufacturer has its headquarters there, and that is Lego. So here we have the Lego building in 3D. I want to show you how we can take advantage of some of these editing tools to better model the built world here. So this building is fairly complex. It took one of our really good editors maybe a couple hours. For me, this would probably take more than that. But some of the really excellent tools that we have to better model what actual buildings look like. One of the great things about editing in 2D or editing in 3D is that a lot of the tools are the same. So if I want to edit vertices, I'm just going to select this building, and now I have control over which face I'm going to edit. Right-clicking brings up a context menu, and I'm going to create a rectangle here. What I want to do is punch out this skylight. Bear with me here while the 3D rendering works on my laptop here. Interesting. Okay, let's try that again. To finish your sketch in 3D, it's actually just a single click. And so now you'll see that I have additional face cut out of this multi-patch feature. And I can take it and I can pop this skylight up. A navigation in 3D editing, a couple of the pro tip for moving around and panning and rotating is that you can press V on the keyboard and that will allow you to do your rotation. So that tool is not normally available in editing mode, but if you press V, that toggles it back on. So now we're gonna do an offset face here. And what this allows us to do is kind of cut the multi-patch apart, and we'll make another feature from it. And that allows us to raise up the parapet of this building. So zooming in here, you can see that it's now raised and all these other faces are controllable. Rectangles are great. A lot of buildings are rectangles, but sometimes they have more than rectangles, right? So there's also a availability of using a circle tool. So the circle tool, click the center, draw out, and now we have a circle that we can mess with. And the circle also has offset face available with it as well. So we'll do this, select this face. And now we have a 3D Lego brick piece sticking up on top of our building. There's one last feature that I want to talk about, and that is the use of the Arc tool. So the old way to edit these arcs would be to select the feature and then make a bunch of different clicks to kind of attempt to draw the arc on your own. One of the new editing tools is the Arc tool. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the window, and then I'm going to create a point here, and I'm going to press the A key. And that A key allows me to then create an arc. And I can control the size of the arc by usually using the plus and the minus keys on the keyboard. And now I have a window that I can control. All right, so I was editing in 3D, so a couple of new tools to make a better model of the built world here. And to wrap that up, the key takeaways of editing in 3D, build a better model of the built world by taking advantage of the circle, offset face, and rectangle tools, as well as the arc. All of these tools give you finer grain control over your multi-patch visualization, so now you're not just stuck with a giant rectangle. I will post this link in the chat, but there's also a bunch of pre-built keyboard shortcuts in ArcGIS Pro. And these, you can use those to your advantage as well. So for me, thank you for riding along on those demonstrations. I'm going to turn over to Marky to facilitate some questions and answers.
Great, thanks, Matt. This first question is about the table of contents. Can you turn selection or editing on/off for all the layers at once?
Let's go to 2D here. So yeah, so it works the same way. You can say you wanted to have, turn them all on at once. It'd be the same thing as clicking the control key. Should turn all of them on and off at once. So just like working in the drawing order if you want to turn everything off.
Great. For the next question, if you create island polygons within the difference tool, will they get stretched when the larger polygon is modified?
The answer to that question is it depends on what options you have on. So if you are editing using the map topology, the features will stretch together. But then there's also the option inside the editing to have where you don't stretch the topology proportionately. So you can actually turn that off, either one of those two.
Great. And for the last question, does the Arc tool create Bezier curves or smooth curves?
These are more Bezier curves, so you're not going to see the vertices all the way around.
Great. And we actually had another question pop in. Can you validate topology for an extent of a layer?
So the error inspector will work over the whole database. So it's a database topology. You can definitely do some filtering, whether or not you want to have use the map extent or the like the layer extent. So there's a bunch of different options here. And you also show different. Maybe you want to check everything at once. You can turn on which one you want. So the default is to do the error checking in the view extent, but you can turn it on to have the entire map extent.
Great. And we actually had a couple more questions pop in too. Is the cut tool from ArcMap being added to Pro since the clip tool works differently?
That I would have to get back to you on with the product team. But if you're looking to do some snipping and splitting, there is a tool called Split that works very similar to the cut tool.
Great, and I've made a note to follow up as well. And another question, there used to be a clean tool. Is that still there to clean up splines?
I am not familiar with the clean tool, so I would have to check with the product team on that as well.
Great, so we have 2 questions to follow up with, and that is it for the questions. Thanks so much, Matt, for going through editing in Pro, both 2D and 3D. And thanks everyone for attending the webinar and spending your time with us. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.